Casual Magic has been sponsored by Quiver, maker of the Quiver and Bolt deck cases and other fine deck holding accessories. Use the code CASUAL on their website for 10% off your order. We're also sponsored by Archetype, the premier site for hosting your decks on the internet. I love them and they love me, and it seems like a good reason for you to use them. You can also support Casual Magic directly by going to our Patreon at patreon.com/ShivamB. And now, on with the show. Hello and welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivam, Bhatt, and Casual Magic is brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., Quiver, and Architect. You can also support me on my Patreon at patreon.com/ShivamB. Today, I have a very, very special guest, a returning guest, my dear friend and a member of the Pauper Advisor, the Pauper Committee, Alex Ullman. He was on an episode earlier, and we just shared chat about Golgari times, and today I was like, Alex, I want you to come on and I want you to teach me about Aristocrats, which is one of my favorite kind of like archetypes in Magic, but I want to learn more because I know that I could be playing better than I am, and I love Aristocrats. I think it's a super great strategy. It's super fun. It's great to see you again, buddy. How's it going?
It's going well. Good to see you again too, and it's the Pauper format panel.
That's what it is. I'm like, there's a middle letter in there, and I'm just like, I don't know. Puff the Magic Dragon. But, Gavin. Lived by Gavin V and frolicked in the Seattle winds in a land called Commons for free. I could do this all day. I'm not going to do this all day because that would be horrendous. But so for those of you at home who don't know, I'm just going to lay out the Aristocrats concept, and then we can talk about it, right?
Yeah.
So, in Innistrad Block Standard, there was Innistrad Ravnica, I guess.
It was Innistrad Return to Ravnica,
Yeah, Innistrad Return to Ravnica. We had a couple of cards, like Cartel Aristocrats and...
Falconwrath Aristocrat.
Yeah, Falconwrath.
Yeah, so...
And, the idea here is, okay, first off, I'm going to tell an aside right now. If you guys ever want to feel old, go back in Scryfall and just hit page down until you get to the set that you started on. And think about how long that took you to get there. And then cry. Because it took a long time to page down to Ravnica.
Fallen Empires.
Yeah, seriously, we'll be here all day if we're going all the way down to the bottom. Yeah, so... They were. Let's see. What's that? The hell? I'm just gonna.
So it was. I can talk about it because it basically it was Pro Tour Gate Crash is when this deck kind of burst onto the scene. It was a deck. Tom Martell won the Pro Tour with this deck called the Aristocrats, and it was designed by Sam Black, I believe, or with the Sam Black Brain Trust. And basically, it was a human typo deck. It had things like, I think it was Champion of the Parish, the card that gets +1/+1 for each human that enters the battlefield under your control. But the kind of game ender, it had a couple game enders, but the big one was Falconwrath Aristocrat, which is 2 black-red for 4/1 flying vampire. And I believe if you sacrifice a human, it gets +1/+1 counter and indestructible.
If you sack a creature, Falconwrath Aristocrat gains indestructible. If you sack a human, it gets a +1/+1 counter and indestructible.
And so it would leverage these cards in combination with, I think the deck also, it had a lot of human cards in it, and Cartel Aristocrat was a black-white sacrifice outlet, black-white for a 2/2.
Cartel Aristocrat was a 2/2 for black and white that sack another creature, gain protect from the color of your choice until end of turn. The key here is that it was a free sack outlet.
Mm-hmm.
And the other cards in the deck, Doom Traveler, of course, the 1/1 that dies into a spirit, Knight of Infamy, which was an exalted 2/1 knight that had protection white. It was just a cheap body. Resto Angel, which lets you exile a thing and bounce it back. Silverblade Paladin, which is just that soul bond thing that gave everybody double strike. Scourgedag High Priest, which let you tap 2 creatures you can. This is a trick. Tap 2 untapped creature you control. Put a 5/5 demon creature put a 5/5 flying demon onto the battlefield, and activate only if a creature died this turn. So you pitch one of your dudes, tap 3 of your guys, and you get a 5/5 demon.
Criminally underplayed card in Commander.
Oh, dude, Scourgedag High Priest is great.
So good.
but yeah, Zealous Conscripts, of course, the Hasty 3/3 that takes control of a permanent you control, aka takes control of your things and feeds it to an aristocrat. And Lingering Souls, because why wouldn't you have Lingering Souls? Yeah, so the general concept here was aristocrats, of course, being that weird long running joke that's like hyper dirty and mean and gross, and it was just a fun pun because this ran around the concept of two aristocrats. Um, Effectively, it's a sack outlet deck.
Mm-hmm.
It's a deck where you put in free sack outlets, throw things away to accrue value, and then
Yeah.
oftentimes that value will kill people.
Yeah, and I think one thing that really has evolved from this is the addition of Blood Artist and Blood Artist type effects. So Blood Artist is not the first, but the most well-known of the early ones, which is 1 in a black for a 0/1 vampire, that when it or another creature dies, you target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And that was kind of the start. And I think when you look at Aristocrats decks today, they're more closely associated with the spout, or basically what's doing the damage or winning you the game, as opposed to the sacrifice outlets themselves. So I think that as we saw more and more, as we see Aristocrats decks pop up over and over again, there was the black-green Aristocrats deck a couple years later, which ran Collected Company. The card lets you flip 2/3 drops into play. And then it had Rally the Ancestors, the one that lets you bring creatures back from the graveyard, white X, but then they get exiled. But if you sacrifice them to something like an Nantuko Husk, 2/2 for 2 in a black that lets you sacrifice a creature to give it +2/+2. And then you have a Zulaport Cutthroat in play.
Oh, my boy Zulaport Cutthroat, man. I adore this card. A 1/1 for 1 in a black that when it or another creature you control dies, everybody loses a life and you gain a life.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. So that's kind of like you said, Aristocrats deck are sacrificing permanence for value to advance your win condition. That's kind of it. And the big thing is that there are decks that are dedicated to being aristocrat decks. Like, that is what they are doing. They are whole hog going forward, trying to put material on the board, sacrifice it with one of these Blood Artist effects on the battlefield to just win the game in one fell swoop. And then there are decks where it can be a line, something you take, for example, going back to Zombie Typo, if you have a Grave Crawler, which comes back, which you can cast again if you have a zombie in play, a Phyrexian Altar, which lets you sacrifice a creature to add any 1 color of mana, and then you have something like a Vengeful Dead, which is the 3/2 that whenever a zombie dies, all opponents lose 1 life, or the blue-black one from Dark Ascension, Diregraph Captain, there we go, which is the same effect. You don't have to be a dedicated zombie aristocrats deck, but you have an aristocrats line. And that is something that kind of, it permeates. So you can see lots of decks that have these little packages where you can kind of just, oops, I win from nowhere. And I really love aristocrats lines. I love the puzzles that they present. I love how you can piece these things together to get kind of these really interesting effects. And they are very, very resilient because you are gaining value from your things dying anyway. So of course you don't mind if you're sending things into combat and having them like wiped away by, wraths or damnations or what have you.
You welcome it.
Yes.
You want these things to die. And the other thing is, it's not just creatures that can be used in aristocrat style things. One of my favorite decks is my Jan Jensen deck, which is artifacts aristocrats. And he uses things like, the famed Mirrodin card, Disciple of the Vault, or Marionette Master, which is like, when an artifact is put into graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power, which is a lot of times how I win. And just like all these other things, which are like, hey, X is going to the graveyard, so I'm going to just start nugging you for a ton. Nadier's Nightblade, whenever a token you control leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses 1, you gain 1, etc.
They've started printing ones for enchantments too. Wicked Visitor from Wilds of Eldraine is 1 in a black, and whenever an enchantment hits the graveyard, you nug each opponent for 1. You deal 1 to their dome, and they even have Narcy Fable Singer, which lets you, when an enchantment hits the graveyard, you draw a card. And it has some other text too, but they're really leaning into this. Basically, any permanent where you've already invested mana into can become a material for an aristocrat deck. And you can do it with lands, but it involves a lot of moving pieces, and we don't necessarily need to talk about that yet, because that's way out there in the Rube Goldberg machine of Commander.
Yeah, I was just sitting there brainstorming. I'm like, is there a one that like does damage when you get lands into the graveyard? And I'm like, Dingus Egg. No, that damages you. That's not what I'm looking for.
So there are a couple ways to do it. They almost all involve Zurin Orb. So you just, anything lets you sacrifice land. Zurin Orb, that great artifact for 0, lets you sacrifice land for 2 life. If you have Titania in play, Titania 1, which makes a 5/3 elemental whenever a land hits the graveyard.
My girl.
I know what I'm talking about here. And then Blasting Station, which is 3 for an artifact from 5th Dawn. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you can untap Blasting Station and then tap and sacrifice a creature. Tap it and sacrifice a creature to deal 1 damage to any target. So with enough lands and Titania, Zurin Orb, you can sack all the lands.
Stop hitting your table.
Sorry. Sack all the lands, make all the creatures, and then you can stack those untap triggers in between. So each time you can untap and ping, 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 ping.
The thing is, though, like, that is such a slow way to win with Titania, since I could also just put out, Concordant Crossroads and then just attack with the 5/3s.
And this is why we are different Commander players.
But that's the point, though. The reason I brought you on here is because I know you love slumming it in the yard with all of these wonderful discards. And, like, I've got personally 2 decks that are no, I'd say that they're straight up just aristocracy decks. One of them, like the aforementioned Mardu Treasures deck that I like to play a lot. Peach's Treasures gets a lot of value for said treasures. And then I've got a white-black deck that I've been working on for many years that I expanded from a Brawl deck I had, which is basically based around gaining a ton of life after throwing a bunch of things away and draining people a lot. It's super fun. Like, I love... Like, I didn't realize how much I enjoyed this until I just started, hurling things into the Ashnode's altar or Phyrexian altars and pulling them back and over again. It's like, oh, this is gross.
Yeah, you have to enjoy that style of play, and it definitely isn't for everyone, because I know when I'm talking to people and I'm looking at decks that sometimes have a little bit of graveyard interaction, my immediate response is, well, could you add this package? And I think, when you're looking at aristocrats decks or aristocrat lines, you're really looking at 3 different components. You're looking at and these are the 3 core components of any kind of dedicated aristocrats line, package, deck. You need to have your sacrifice outlets. You need to have your material, and you need to have spouts. Things that will actually win you the game or advance your game plan. There are other ancillary ones that I like to call kind of like engines. They kind of do something, they generate value, but they don't necessarily win you the game or advance you towards victory if you have them on the battlefield or in play. But they can still supplement everything.
Ironically, the image that comes to mind, which is fitting for aristocrats, is a typical meat grinder, right? Like, you put in raw chunks on one side, grinds up, sausage comes out the other side. In this case, the raw chunks are whatever random creatures or tokens or things you have, and the sausage coming out the other side is just draining the opponent for $1 billion. I've always wondered why Tom Martell didn't run Falkenrath Noble in there, because it feels like that would have been the easy win, right? Because it says whenever Noble or another creature dies, you drain and target a player for 1. And it's like, but I guess it just wasn't fast enough for what he was doing.
I mean, if you're looking at that deck also had a lot of 4-drops with Falkenrath, Aristocrat, and Restoration Angel, and but then again, I don't know.
Tom Martell's a better player than I am, so I figure he knew what he was doing.
Same. So, and I think it's also important that a lot of times when you're running a dedicated Aristocrats deck, you want one of these pieces to be in the command zone. Um, if you're doing something dedicated, you really want one of these pieces, whether it's a sacrifice outlet, something that generates material, or a spout, and sometimes an engine. But you want it in the command zone because it makes everything else easier. You don't have to find as many pieces. You don't have to go digging for as many pieces. You don't have to pack your deck with tutors. You can pack it with card draw. One thing that is very nice about Aristocrats decks is that there are so many iterations of these effects that you can just run a high amount of redundancy. So you don't necessarily have to play tutors. You can lean into things like card draw or just playing the game naturally to have the cards come. And it lets you kind of just play the game until you're ready to do the thing, which is really nice if you're actually going to play Commander to play Commander, as opposed to going to play Commander to try and win the game.
Let's not get into that debate right now, man. We've already got a topic. But the thing is, like, I think that's a very salient point you say about making sure your commander is also one of your engine pieces, or like the sack outlet or whatever for your aristocrats build. Because, like, I think about, for instance, one of my favorites is Slimefoot, the stowaway, which is whenever a sapperling you control dies, Slimefoot does damage to everybody and you gain a life, and then you can pay 4 to create a 1/1 sapperling. In that creature alone, you have both the generator for the material and you have the spout. So you just need to find various ways of sacking sapperlings, which is not hard to do in a green-black deck. Or like, you know, Teysa Karlov, who's like, if a creature dying causes a triggered ability to trigger, it does twice, which means all your spouts double. And Elas Ilkor, which is just another, like, things come into play, you gain a life, things leave play, they lose a life. Very, very solid kind of thing.
Yeah, and those are, you know, you'll see some of the best ones, like Slimefoot, kind of cross lines. They kind of do two things at once. One that I'm kind of fond of talking about, also black-white, is Elenda the Dusk Rose, which is 2 black-white for a 1/1. I believe it has lifelink. But whenever a creature dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. Yeah. And then when it dies, you get a 1/1 lifelink vampire equal to its power. Now that is, it's kind of a spec. But it's also material. Like, you sacrifice it and you generate just
infinite value.
Yeah.
Elenda was my commander for the brawl deck that I had built. Because I had built basically a white-black brawl deck set in Amonkhet / Ixalan / Kaladesh era. And so, like, the whole idea of just like, use all these things, sack these people to die to gain life, and then Crested Sunmare starts shooting out like 5/5 indestructible horses. You know, it's just like, it's gross.
Oh, Elenda is fantastic.
Oh, that card is such a house.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this like, and like, you know, there's a lot of these kind of black-white commanders tend towards aristocrat-y type of vibes.
There are so many different ways to build aristocrats, and I will say that if you are looking to build an aristocrats deck and you're looking to start at the baseline, you don't have to, but you really want to include black in your deck. Black has the best spouts in Blood Artist, which we've talked about, Zulaport Cutthroat. It has other ones as well that mimic these effects. You know, Sir Conrad is a fantastic aristocrat spout.
Nutter Butter's card.
It's also an engine. It's also a great commander. It's 3 black for a 5/4 knight. Whenever a creature leaves play or leaves your graveyard, and does it also trigger when a creature goes into the graveyard from your library?
It sure does.
It deals like, 1 to each opponent. Move? Does a creature switch zones?
Conrad is one of the dumbest uncommons of all time, right? Like, if a creature basically goes anywhere except play, it does damage, and then it lets you mill to just, like, if you need to just start churning through. It's so gross.
But you don't have to make a aristocrats deck that includes black. You do not. You can, and we'll get to why in a little bit, but black is a great starting point because black can do everything that Aristocrats wants to do. It has your free sacrifice outlets. And I'll talk about why free is important in just a second. It has token generators, it has spouts, and it has engines. So if you're looking to get started, and this is your first Aristocrats build, look to include black in your deck. It does not have to be mono black. It doesn't have to be 2 colors. It can be 3 colors. It can be whatever. But I think a good starting point is black. And I think the best way to start any Aristocrats deck is with your sacrifice outlets. You want sacrifice outlets that, and when I say a sacrifice outlet, I mean something that lets you sacrifice any number of, I'm going to say creatures, but if you're building an artifact deck, think of ones that let you sacrifice artifacts. If you're building an enchantment deck, think of ones that let you sacrifice enchantments. But basically lets you sacrifice any number of creatures at will, whenever you want. Nothing, there's no bound on it. Let's look at something like Carrion Feeder. 1/1 for black, can't block, sacrifice a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on Carrion Feeder.
Classic, fantastic sacrifice outlet. You can do that whenever. There's no timing restriction. There's no mana cost. Compare that to a card, which is another card I love, called Disciple of Griselbrand, which is 1 and a black for a 1/1 from Innistrad. It says 1, sacrifice a creature, gain life equal to its toughness. That 1 mana cost is a world of difference. It means that you, even though the effect is great, you're gaining life, and maybe that has synergy with your deck. You can't just do it whenever you want. You have to have open mana. And it also means that there's a bound on it. It means you can only do as much as you've got mana for, right? Like Ailey Eternal Pilgrim is another one with the exact same line of text. And she is insanely good, but just like the fact that it's not a free, the difference between free and 1 is unbelievably high.
It's huge, especially if you're doing the thing, you want to do this a lot. You want to sacrifice a lot every turn. So that way it just, the wheels keep churning. You're hitting everyone. You're kind of going through the motions, and you're taking down the table with you as you eat your board. Some other really good free sacrifice outlets are Viscera Seer, 1/1 for 1/1 for black that lets you sacrifice a creature to scry 1. And here's why I'm also going to say that it's real. You can do Aristocrats in any color. There are multiple fantastic colorless sacrifice outlets. We already mentioned Phyrexian Altar. There's Ashnod's Altar, which is 3 for an artifact that lets you sacrifice a creature to add 2 colorless. There's Altar of Dementia, 2 for an artifact that lets you sacrifice a creature to mill target player for that power equal to, for a number of cards equal to that creature's power. You have Spawning Pit, which is 2, lets you sacrifice a creature to put a charge counter onto Spawning Pit, and then you can pay 1 to remove 2 charge counters to make a 2/2 spawn creature token. Which is, again, it's kind of neat because it's a sacrifice outlet and it can potentially generate more material. That's kind of cool. Altar of Dementia is cool because it's a sacrifice outlet that also can win you the game if you have enough creatures.
Yeah, but it also puts a target on. I mean, mind you, playing Aristocrats is already going to kind of put a target on you, but milling people just get them real dumb. But you can mill yourself too, remember?
Yeah. You can mill yourself, especially if you have Sir Conrad out. One of my favorite sacrifice outlets, which is not good, but I love it, is Phyrexian Plague Lord, which is 3 black. Oh, I love this card an unreasonable amount. 3 black for a 4/4, and you can tap and sacrifice to give target creature -4/-4, or you can just sacrifice a creature to give target creature -1/-1. And you can also tell that I have not played a lot with a lot of the newer cards because I've left out Yawgmoth, who's just disgusting. 2 black for a 2/4 protection from humans. Sacrifice a creature. put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. You pay a life and you draw a card. It's like one of the perfect sacrifice outlets, and it fills your hand. So it's engine and it's sacrifice outlet. Another classic one is Goblin Bombardment. 1 in a red, sacrifice a creature, deal 1 damage to target creature. And these are all exactly what you're looking for. They're unbound. They do something to advance your board, whether that's mana, cards, whatever, removing creatures, dealing damage. They all have the same purpose. Take creatures that are in play and get them out of here.
Yes. And like there's also lands like High Market and stuff like that are also just very good incidental sack outlets. And I think people should be playing more, because you never want, like when they stick your commander underneath like an Oath Ring or something like that, you want to be able to just sack it and just get it out of there and get it back to your zone. It's just handy, useful. But in decks that are considering like aristocracy, getting utility from anywhere is good. And it's not to say that, like, you know, having a 1 mana or 2 mana, whatever casting cost, 2 mana cost on a sack outlet is terrible, because sometimes the rewards are worth it. However, you don't want those to be your only ones.
No. And, you know, there are a lot of other really good sacrifice outlets out there that cost mana or have a timing restriction. One I've started playing less because it's really mean is Sadistic Hypnotist from Odyssey, which is 3 black for a 2/2, and you can activate this only as a sorcery, but you sacrifice a creature, target opponent discards 2 cards.
Oh.
Yeah, I have played that with Nath of the Guilt Leaf, the 4/4 that yes, that's exactly the face you should make when you're playing against that deck.
That's not a
because whenever an opponent discards a card with Nath, you make a 1/1 creature. So if you make them discard 2 creatures, you get 2 more creatures to sacrifice. So you can make them discard 2 more cards and get 2 more creatures. Listen, if you really want to build aristocrats, you can sit down and make a really, really good aristocrats deck, and you will probably be the enemy of the table. And you have to be okay with that.
Oh yeah.
It's not as oppressive as stacks, where you're trying to lock people out of playing the game. You absolutely can build it to be like stacks, where you're locking people out of the game, but you don't.
Yeah, you just got to put in those stupid effects of whenever you sack a creature, they have to sack a creature too, type of things.
Yes. Or yes, Grave Pact, 1 black. Whenever a creature you control dies, each other player sacrifices a creature. You can build it to be completely asymmetrical, and people will be like, "Listen, don't play that deck again." Which is their right.
You have to use, if you want them to like Grave Pact, you have to use the 8th edition one, which has the Grim Reaper pointing to a grave and saying, "Get in the box," which is the funniest art in all of Magic.
I have one of those in my Glissa 1 deck. Grave Pact is probably my favorite commander card, and I only played in 1 deck because otherwise I would play it in every deck and no one would ever play commander with me.
Like, I don't run Grave Pact effects just because I find them to be not the kind of gameplay that I want to have. It encourages a lot of like just bad. It makes people feel real grumpy, but it's entirely viable. If you're running a high-powered Aristocrats deck, there's no shame in that. Like, for instance, Grimgrin, my beloved Zombo, is himself a spout and a sack outlet, right? Like, because it's that sack another creature, untap Grimgrin, and put a 1/1 counter on it, and that way you can go and slam in and slam a Gemma and get real big and dumb. And in that deck, if you've got a Grave Pact on top of that, you're sacking it, you're making him pitch their defender, and then you're punching him in the face. I should put a Grave Pact in there. Oh, it'd be thematic.
So a couple commanders, if you want your commander to be your sacrifice outlet. You have Yahenni Undying Partisan, which is a 2/2 that lets you sacrifice a creature to make them indestructible until end of turn. And whenever a creature an opponent control dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on Yahenni. You have the aforementioned Yawgmoth. You have Varl's the Scar Striped, which is 1 black green for a 2/2 troll warrior from Dragon's Maze that that says sacrifice a creature, regenerate Varls, and all creatures in your graveyard have scavenge equal to their mana value. So scavenge is an ability where you can pay a cost and it puts that many +1/+1 counters on a creature. And Varls, the EDH rec page for Varls is wild because it's either, these CDH adjacent Protean Hulk Pattern of Rebirth combo decks, or I'm scavenging Force of Savagery, which is 2 and a green for an 8/0 onto Varls to win after I give them Infect.
That's gross. That's so funny.
Some other sacrifice outlet commanders that are like free sack outlets are cards like there's the Mardu Partners from Ikoria Commander. I cannot remember their names, but it's I want to say Sylvis and they're the Mardu Partners from that deck. And
hang on, I'm going to look them up. Keep going.
One generates material, but the black-red one lets you sacrifice a human to make it indestructible until end of turn. That much I know off the top of my head. And you can also run bound, ones with mana cost associated with them, which is fine. It just
these were my freaking they were my preview for that set. Trin and Sylvar.
Yes.
Trin is a 3/3 and a white that says at the beginning of the step, if you attack this turn, you make a 1/1 human soldier. And then Sylvar is the other half of that, the red and black 4/2 that with menace it says sack a human, put a 1/1 counter on it, and it gains indestructible to turn. So one person makes humans, the other person eats humans.
You can run ones that have a bound, ones that are not just, I'm going to do this endlessly. I think the best one is, the commander of your Crested Sunmare deck, Krav the Unredeemed, which is 4 and a black for a 4/4 demon, and lets you pay, and it partners with Regna. But you can pay black and sacrifice X creatures to gain X life, draw X cards, and I believe put X +1/+1 counters on Krav.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, gain X life, draw X card, and put X counter. It is great.
So that one, even though there is a limit, even though there is a single mana limit, you can sacrifice 20 creatures.
Yeah. It's like that's a weird limit because it's not really, it's like, it's not a free sack outlet, but it's essentially a very heavily discounted one.
It's the 2-for-1 deal.
Yeah.
So
the other one, of course, you've got the core vaults, right? Like they're not technically free sack outlets, but they sure encourage it.
Yep. If you want to look at one that's a little more restricted, from Brothers War's Ashnod, which lets you sacrifice, when it attacks, you can sacrifice a creature to make a Power Stone, and then you can exile creatures from your graveyard to make Power Stones, which are these, you can pay 5 to exile a creature from your graveyard to make a Power Stone, which are these mana rocks that you can use to cast artifacts, but that's about it. You can't cast any other spells, but you can use it to activate abilities.
You just can't do creature spells. I think you could do...
it's not artifacts.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. You're right. It's tricky. It's artifacts and abilities. But there's also like Chatterfang. Black, sack X squirrels, and target creature gets -X until end turn. Or +X, -X rather. And you just make a gajillion squirrels, or you have a Maskwood Nexus or whatever, and you can just use that to start sacking things.
Chatterfang, great crossover commander because it generates material and it's a sacrifice outlet.
Yeah.
So let's actually pivot over to material, which is kind of the next core component. And with that, it's really, what are you sacrificing?
Yes.
And like I said, we're going to focus on creatures today. You can sacrifice treasures. You can sacrifice artifacts. You can do weird things with Scrap Trawler and Kruk Clan Ironworks to get a loop going. But we're going to really be focusing on creatures. And there are 2 ways to go about it. You can either just have creatures, or you can have tokens, or you can have a mix of both. So let's say you're working with creatures as material. You want those that either are easy to bring back, or just come with friends, or do something when they enter or leave the battlefield. We've talked about Gravecrawler. Reassembling Skeleton is a great one.
Oh, that card is
One in a
so
black,
good.
one in a black for a 1/1, and you can pay one in a black to return it to the battlefield. And there are so many reassembling skeletons because there's Persistent Skeleton, which is basically the same card, except it costs 1 black and it costs 2 in a black to return it to the battlefield. You have Bloodsoaked Champion, which is 1 black for a 2/1 that can't block, but it has raid. So if you've attacked this turn, you can pay 1 in a black to bring it back. And the nice thing about that is that it doesn't matter if you've attacked once. As long as you have 2 mana, you can bring it back 6, 7, 8 times, which, is really great. You have the ones that come back for free, like Nether Shadow and other ones. Now, I don't recommend Nether Shadow, which is black for a 1/1 with haste. And if it's in the graveyard with 3 creature cards above it, it comes back into play, because then you have to care about graveyard ordering matter. And
that's old fashioned, man. But like, what is that stupid Vengevine, for instance? That's one right there, right?
Vengevine is 2 green for a 4/3 elemental with haste, and I believe if you've cast 2 creature cards per turn this turn, return to the battlefield under your control. There's Bloodghast, black for a 2/1 vampire spirit that can't block, but has landfall, return Bloodghast from the graveyard to the battlefield. There's Nether Trader, which is a black 1/1 haste with shadow, and whenever a creature dies, you can pay black to bring Nether Shadow back from your graveyard to the battlefield. There are so many of these. There are also ones that are, a little slower. A lot of them, those are kind of the big ones. There's a Rot Farm Skeleton from Dragon's Maze, which I think is a 4/1 for 2 black-green, and it lets you pay 2 black-green, mill 4 cards, and it lets you put that back into play, the Rot Farm Skeleton. There are also cards with Unearth or Disturb, anything that really lets you get extra value out of creatures. And then there's there's tokens. I don't need to talk about tokens. Anything that generates tokens can provide material. But
one thing I do want to say, though, one of the things that is really underrated, incredibly good in an Aristocrats type of build, are those creatures that come out and have at the beginning of combat, I make 2 3/1s or whatever the hell it is. And, like Urabrask's Forge, which is not a creature, an artifact, right? At the beginning of combat, put an oil counter on, and then make an X1 Phyrexian Horror that's trample and haste, where X is the number of oil counters on it, and sack the token at the beginning of the next end step. It creates material and sacks it, or you can sack that to any number of whatever you need to sack to create stuff. And but you're getting basically a faucet of things every turn.
Cards like Bitter Blossom, which makes a 1/1 fairy for 1 life every upkeep. Goblin Assault, which makes a 1/1 goblin. Goblin Rabble Master, which makes goblins when you attack.
Tender Dryad that makes sapperlings.
And the new one. Yeah,
the new one that makes gnomes.
All of these are great. Now, I'm going to carve out a special area right here. If you're running an Aristocrats deck and you're running creatures that generate multiple tokens when they enter the battlefield. So let's pick, I'm going to pick one of my favorite commanders, Ishkana the Graph Widow, which is 4 and a green for a 3/5 spider. And if you have Delirium, which is 4 card types in your graveyard, it comes in with 3 1/2 spiders with Reach Friends. And then it has this other line of text which says 6 and a black, target player loses life equal to the number of spiders you control. But what's really important here is the number of creatures it generates. You want something that generates at least 2 additional bodies. And if you're running Ashnod's Altar, like we talked about, and this other card called Nim Deathmantle, you basically have access to an unbound number of creatures. Now, Nim Deathmantle is 2 colorless for an artifact equipment from Scars of Mirrodin. And it says, an equipped creature gets +2/+2, is a zombie in addition to its other creature types, and has Intimidate. That's great. That's wonderful. But it has this really awesome line of text, which is, whenever a creature dies, you may pay 4 colorless mana. If you do, return that creature to the battlefield with Nim Death Mantle attached to it.
So good.
Now this is I need to say this because I don't think people who have started Commander in the past 3 or 4 or 5 years really understand how utterly feared this combo was in like 2012-13, because it was just if you saw one side of this, you're like, oh no, we are about to die. Now this is a like 7 mana 4-card combo that doesn't even win the game on its own. But it
will though. It will.
It will. Well, listen, I know it does. You know it does. But you can do this with anything that generates. And if you just generate 2 creatures, you have to stack it so it will equip to the creature that generates the tokens. But there are so many of those in Magic.
Think about the classic John Dude sprouting Thrinax, the red, black, green for a 3/3. When it dies, make 3 1/1 green sapling creature tokens. Yes. Good, clean fun.
Yes. And if you have enough, you basically also can generate unbound amounts of mana. Like you can and then you can do whatever you want with that. Now, what I like to do with that is just sacrifice it over and over and over and over and over again until my opponents are dead from a Blood Artist. But you can also here's a fun sidestep outlet if you're running a typal deck. If you're doing a typal aristocrat strategies, whether that's goblins, elves, humans, zombies, there's this card that was printed in Kaldheim called Skemfar Shadow Sage, which is 3 and a black for a 2/5 elf. And when it enters the battlefield, choose 1. Gain X life, where X is the greatest number of creatures of the type you control the most of, or each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of creatures you can control the most of.
Huh.
It is a great typal finisher, in the sense that if you have enough creatures of any type, you just put that out and it ends the game in one fell swoop.
Wow.
And if you draw it early, it gains you a ton of life.
Oh, that's gross.
And it goes in any typal deck. It goes in, even though it's an elf, it goes in any creature type matters deck.
Oh my God, Alex! You know what I just realized while you were going through the Nim Death Mantle loop? We just got in Eldraine one of the dumbest possible things you could do with Nim Death Mantle and an altar of whatever your choice. Gruff triplets.
Yes.
3 green for a 3/3 that tramples, enters a battlefield. If it isn't a token, make 2 tokens that are copies of it. When Gruff Triplets dies, put a number of 1/1 counters on equal to its power to each creature you control named Gruff Triplets. So you pitch the first one. So you play the first one. You get 3 Gruff Triplets. You pitch the first token to the yard. Everybody gets +2 and +1/+1. So you got 2 4/4s. You pitch the original to the yard. You've got a 5/5 Gruff Triplets left. And then you stick Nim Death Mantle on the dude who just went to the yard. He comes back and you get more Gruff Triplets that you can just start looping again. This is disgusting.
Yeah.
That is
once you really understand what these cards do together, it opens up a world of possibilities. Again, it's one of my favorite combos in Commander. I love it. Again, just like Great Pact, I try not to put it into too many decks. Right now, I just have it in my Ishkana deck because what's more fun than trampling over everyone with a horde of spiders? If you're looking at
a green Aristo.
Oh, you can make Gruul Aristocrats, and I'll talk about that a little later because that is wild.
Who's the head of Gruul Aristocrats? What does that even mean?
So basically, I'll talk about Persist combo later, but you run Grumgully the Generous.
Grumgully
the Generous, which says
nutters.
Each non-human creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And then you just run any creature with Persist. Mm-hmm. So those counters negate, and you just have an infinite loop.
Thank you, Kitchen Finks, or what the hell is it? What was the one that you sack it to break a land?
Woodfall Primus.
No, not Woodfall. Well, that one too. But I mean the Fulminator, right? Oh no, you can't because that's Rakdos.
And it also doesn't have persist.
Fair.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? Fulminator Rage or what? Whatever. Not the point. The thing is,
Murderous Redcap is the one with persist.
Murderous Redcap. Thank you, Jesus Christ. That would have killed me. Murderous Redcap is the one I was thinking of. But one of the things I like about the Aristocrats builds, generally speaking, is that it lets me use a lot of my favorite limited cards over again in really disgusting ways. Things like Morbid Opportunist, which was from like Innistrad. You know, whenever one or more creatures die, draw a card once a turn. Or Priest of the Forgotten Gods, which is the one which lets you sack 2 other creatures and tap it.
Yep.
Any player, any number of target players loses 2 life and sacks a creature, and you add 2 black and draw a card. I love that card. Card is so stupid.
So if you're looking to build material into your commander, there are a couple. We talked about Elenda Duskrose. We talked about Krav and Regna. If you're still staying in black, you can do something like all the commanders just escape me. Hapatra is a great material commander. It generates tokens. Chatterfang generates tokens. So Hapatra is a black and a green for a 2/2, and whenever it deals damage, you put a -1/-1 counter on a creature. Whenever a counter gets placed on an opponent's creature, you make a 1/1 snake.
Girl.
We've talked about Slimefoot, which is another material commander. You know, if you really want to go off the deep end and go big, you can do Bladewing the Risen as an Aristocrats Commander, which is 3 black, red. And when it enters, the key part is when it enters the battlefield, you can bring a dragon back, or is it a cast trigger? I think it's when it enters the battlefield. You get a dragon back from your graveyard, which is, you know, hey.
When it ETBs.
When it enters the battlefield, great. Because then if the dragon you get back is, you know, let's say, I don't know, Hoarding Dragon, 3 red for a 4/4, and when it enters the battlefield, search your library for an artifact and exile it underneath. And then when this creature dies, you draw that artifact. You just have a fun little Nim Deathmantle loop with dragons.
And there's also, the other Bladewing is also good. Deathless Tyrant. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, you get a 2/2 zombie for each creature in your graveyard, which is kind of disgusting. We haven't talked about Pitiless Plunderer, one of the greatest rewards ever. Whenever another creature you control dies, make a treasure.
Oh yeah, my God, so to me, that falls under, that's a spout.
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking about it because I was like, how did we forget Pitiless Plunderer? Because I was looking for
one of Pitiless Plunderer.
No, because the card I was thinking about was Jared. Gerard?
Golgari Lynchlord. Gerard, yeah.
No, not Gerard. I mean, the what the hell's a mono black dude who is makes a deathless makes a zombie
corrupted bishop?
Yeah.
Jaren corrupted
Jaren? Yeah, Jaren. Jaren something. Hang on, I'm going to look this up. You keep talking.
Is it the one that when if you have exactly 13 life, it flips into something disgusting?
No, that one's also disgusting. Hang on, I got to look this up because this is
the Lich Lord, the one that makes like 1 million zombie knights.
That's also disgusting, but no. God, there's
the subtitle of this podcast, Alex and Shivam. It's disgusting.
Yeah, it's like, think about the dumbest black and blue zombie cards you can think of. Where the hell is he? Gisa is also really good though.
Gisa
Jadar, is that's what it is. Jadar, Ghoulcaller, Nephalia, the 1/1 for 1 and a black. At the beginning of your end step, if you control no creature with Decayed, you get a 2/2 zombie with Decayed. Every turn, you get another zombie, and it's very easy to just keep like pitching them, so you keep getting more thingy bobbers.
And we should also give a special shout out to Ophiomancer in this material.
Ophiomancer,
area.
Yes.
2 and a black. If at the beginning of any upkeep you don't control a snake, make a 1/1 snake with Death Touch. And that's really good if you're doing a kind of slower Aristocrats build where you're, I'll sacrifice this snake. Oh, look, I'm getting another snake. Well, I'm going to sacrifice this snake. Oh, look, another snake. Just endless snakes.
I tried to run this in my Hapatra deck until I realized I'm never in a position where I'm just not making, I just don't have snakes, so it just sat there. But Ophiomancer is just such a solid continual value engine because it's an each upkeep card, which means not just yours, their upkeep, which means you're just getting more snakes on their turn, your turn, their turn, your turn. It's It's a good, solid. I mean, she is a good body to have.
So we've talked about sacrifice outlets. We've talked about material. Let's talk about spouts. And spouts are how you're going to win the game. Spouts are cards like Altar of Dementia. They're cards like Blood Artist, Sir Conrad. These are the ones that say when a creature dies, do damage, do something, something that progresses the win condition. And I'm separating out ones that don't just outright do damage or advance your game, because those to me are engines and they're very different. They fill a very different
like
role.
Grim Haruspex, whenever another creature you control dies, draw a card.
Yeah, that's a very, very different. Like, yes, drawing cards is great, and drawing the cards may lead to you winning the game. But unless you're actually advancing your game towards an end, it's just putting more cards in your hand, which again can help you win the game, but don't directly win you the game.
So for me, the iconic spout here isn't a Blood Artist, or isn't Blood Artist specifically, but it's Mayhem Devil. Because Mayhem Devil, whenever a player sacks a permanent, Mayhem Devil deals 1 damage to any target. I played a lot of Cat Oven in my day, and I adore this card.
Mayhem Devil is one of the archetypical, just platonic ideal of for me, a commander spout, because it's universal in the sense that it looks at everyone sacrificing a permanent.
Go ahead, use those treasures.
But what I really like is that it's not universal in the sense that you have to target something or someone with that ping ability. And I'm going to get on the soapbox for a second. I love Aristocrats. I think Zulaport Cutthroat and cards like it are fantastic cards, but I think people should be running Blood Artist more than Zulaport Cutthroat. Blood Artist allows you to target. It allows you to make choices and say, I'm going to take life away from you, not you. Zulaport Cutthroat is indiscriminate. It pings everyone at the same time. And this is why I think it's important that if you're building a dedicated Aristocrats deck, you really want to look at targeted ones first. Not that you shouldn't run the ones that are universal, but you want to look at Blood Artist and Falcon Wrath Noble, which is a 2/2 version with flying for 3 and a black. Because you can use it to play the table early. Oh, no. I'm not going after you. You leave me alone. You don't come at me with that. You leave me alone. Because if you're building Aristocrats in a way that's just going to end the game, you're going to end up in one of these unbound loops where it doesn't matter that you're targeting someone with Blood Artist. You're going to have enough triggers to target everyone. So why make enemies early if you can just take them all out late?
Yeah, because there's a political aspect to it that's very, very important. Because if you start just attacking everybody indiscriminately, or if you have target, it allows you to discuss with the other players, see who the problem is, figure out where you want the damage to go, and it gives you a little bit of a buffer, as in like, hey, I'm not aiming at you. Whereas if you've got only universals, everybody's gonna be like, oh, okay, so we're just gonna kill that guy because he's annoying. Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said. I would think about, have you thought about Ziatora the Incinerator, the Jund one from New Capenna, which is, it's a 6/6 flyer for 3 and Jund. And it says, at the beginning of your end step, you may sack another creature. And when you do, Ziatora deals damage to equal to its creature's power to any target. And then you create 3 treasure tokens. So it's kind of disgusting.
It is disgusting. I have a special place in my heart in Jund for Sekwar the Death Keeper.
That's a classic.
So it was my first zombie typo deck. And for those of you who don't know, it's 2 and black, red, green for a 4/3 Orc Shaman. And whenever a non-token creature dies under your control, you get a 3/1 Graveborn creature token with haste. I have such a special place in my heart for that deck and that card, and I keep trying to put it back together, and I haven't quite figured it out yet. But it was one that I accidentally, in one of my first games with it, found an infinite loop where I had a zombie, I had Phyrexian Altar, I had another zombie, and I had Perforos God on the Forge on the battlefield.
Oh, no.
And so, yeah. And this was like 2013, 2012. So it wasn't, and for those of you who don't know it, that's 3 and a red for the relevant text is whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, Perforos deals 2 damage to everyone. all opponents. I saw that. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. At the time, we had like a soft no infinites rule at our games, which was fine. It was casual. It was a good time. But going back to spouts, we talked about Slimefoot. We talked about all kind of anything that says when a creature dies, do X, do damage. So you have your Blood Artist, you have your Mayhem Devil. If you really want to go big in red, you have Rage Thrower, which is 5 and a red for a 4/2 that says do 2 damage to each opponent when something dies. You have Vicious Shadows, which is 6 and a red for an enchantment that I believe says when a creature dies, Vicious Shadows deals damage to target player equal to the number of cards in their hand. Let me tell you, that is like a commander card if there ever was one.
Oh my god!
It's
what the hell?
It's gruesome.
It costs so much though. 6 and a red.
Yeah, but you're running Phyrexian Altar and Ashnod's Altar anyway.
I guess that's free. I guess that's true. God, that does a lot of damage. Oh my god. Yeah, you could go ahead, draw 38 cards. Feel free. Whoops, did I just pop a token? Oh gosh.
You have, I talked about Blasting Station a little bit before. That's kind of a spout, but needs a lot of other things to go right. You have the flip side of Outpost Siege, which is the dragon side, which is whenever a permanent you control goes to the graveyard, deals 1 damage to any target or target player. I prefer the other side, which is just, drawing cards, but no harm in sacrificing things for value either. And if you're looking at spouts that are also commanders, we talked about Sir Conrad. We talked about Slimefoot. Another one that's out there that there's Vran Executioner Thane, which is 1 and a black for a 2/2 Phyrexian Vampire. The problem with that one is that it only triggers once per turn, but it does deal 2, and you gain 2 life for everyone. There's Judith the Scourge Diva, which is 1 black red for a 2/2 that gives all non-token creatures you control +1+. It gives all creatures +1/+0, and whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you can ping someone for 1. That's a good one.
What about Jury Master of the Review?
That is a great one. That is black and a red for a 1/1, and whenever you sacrifice a permanent, you put a +1/+1 counter on Jury, and whenever Jury dies, it deals damage equal to its power, to any target.
Yeah. It's a real just hammer. That card has won me a lot of games in my treasure deck just because it's a good way to eat a lot of treasures, put a bunch of 1/1 counters on her, pitch her to some any number of sack outlets, and then just go and kill a dude. It's great.
You can also run Elash El-Kor, which is the 2/2 for card. Black and a white. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life, and whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life. You can do that with Luris of the Dream Den as a companion. So you can do, which is Luris is 1 black, white for a 3/2 with the companion text. But each turn you can cast a permanent with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard. And the companion condition is no permanents in your library can have mana value greater than 2. And we missed a Sacrifice Outlet commander before from Lost Caverns of Ixalan is Bartolome, which is 2 and a 1 for black, white. Ixalan, Lost Caverns of Ixalan is like one of the best graveyard sets in a long time.
It added so much to just aristocracy type things and go to the graveyard type things. But you know what though? Honestly, I hate to cut you off there, Alex, but we have hit our timer and I need to go get my kid from school. So, because I forgot it's a Wednesday, it's a half day. So, because that's the therapy bill I don't want to deal with. Papa was talking about aristocrats and left me at the curb.
I understand.
But man, I need to have you come back on and we need to go back and start delving into the graveyard some more.
Yeah,
because this is such a huge huge topic, but I think we've given people a good place to start at least. But if they wanted to come and ask you any questions about this or figure out how to make a Pauper Aristocrats deck, where can they go? Where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Twitter at Nerd to the Core. You can also find my website, nerdtothecore.com. I'm a member of the Pauper Format panel, and I write about Pauper regularly on that website. You can also find me on Discord. I'm at Nerd to the Core there. I write for Channel Fireball. My articles come out once a week or so. But basically, Twitter, Blue Sky. I think I'm on Mastodon still. I will say one secret tech that I know I have to mention. If you're building an Aristocrats deck, look into Gate to the Afterlife. This is an artifact from Amonkhet. It costs 3, and it has some text that you don't need to care about finding God Pharaoh's gift. But what it really is that whenever a non-token creature dies, you draw a card, you gain a life, and then you may draw a card and discard a card. You are going to see so many cards. I highly recommend this card. Go through it, see what you can do. It's a delight. It helps you churn through your deck and just does everything you want.
Yeah, it's kind of disgusting, actually. Because, like, you don't... Like, one of the things about Aristocrats is that your yard ends up being a vault for value. So you pitching cards to the yard is not necessarily as negative as I tend to perceive it being. Because there's just, like, flashback and unearth and all these other things, ways to get things back, pitch some of your regenerate, like, I don't know, whatever. You guys understand. We're not going to go into a whole epilogue here. But as always, you can find me at Gear Report Gears. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are sold, or at Cool Stuff Inc. every Tuesday, or at YouTube every Tuesday, thanks to my editor, Dan. And you can find me on my other 2 podcasts, Shivam Wheeler Love Magic, or The Chronicle of Dragonlance, or on Patreon at patreon.com/ShivanB. And remember, my friends, it's not magic without the gathering, and we'll see you next time.